Have you ever been scrolling through TikTok or Reels or whatever the kids are using these days, and you see one of those posts that is like nostalgia commercials, and they just play a commercial from the early 2000s with a super catchy jingle that then gets stuck in your head for the rest of the day? I grew up in that era, so I felt like I constantly had some song from some commercial running through my mind at any given moment. We've lost that as a society, but I got to thinking, who made those? This was before AI, so that was a real person who wrote that song, sang the jingle. It was a real voice telling me about a $5 footlong, probably a musician. So who were they? What happened to their career? I decided to see if I could find out, and maybe I even got the chance to talk to one of the people who made one of the most famous jingles of the 2010s. It's kind of a weird video. I'm not sure if anyone else will really care about it, but I was super fascinated, and some of these stories are actually kind of interesting. So give this video a like if you did end up enjoying it. Leave a comment of your favorite jingle from your childhood that you always remember, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more of my random research projects that no one else cares about. Also, I'm going to try and play the commercial before each section, but maybe copyright won't let me do that. Who knows with YouTube.
Wonderball! What's in my Wonderball? Who knows what surprises a Wonderball can hide?
The Wonderball jingle was honestly one of the hardest to research because I don't think anyone else in the world really even cares about it. The Nestle Wonderball was a little chocolate ball that had candy shapes and prizes inside, but it was discontinued pretty early because it was a choking hazard, so I don't think it really had the staying power of some of these other jingles. However, this song was a staple in my childhood household. My brothers and I would sing this song all the time. The jingle itself is actually kind of hard to trace, but it goes all the way back to the 1950s when a group called the Monotones, which was a doo-wop pop group, created a song called The Book of Love, which itself was inspired by hearing a commercial for Pepsodent toothpaste that said,
"You'll wonder where the yellow went when you brush your teeth with Pepsodent."
The Monotones recorded and released The Book of Love in 1957, and that song made the Monotones kind of a one-hit wonder. They didn't really do anything else after that song. Well, they didn't do anything popular after that song. They did plenty of other things. Decades later, Nestle borrowed that melody, changed Who Wrote the Book of Love into What's in a Wonderball, which I'm sure was super difficult to come up with, and then hired someone to sing it as their jingle for the Wonderball. But who was that singer, and who actually finished up the lyrics to it? And honestly, I cannot figure that out. The notoriously super reliable and super accurate Google AI told me that someone named Ron Wasserman was the writer of that jingle. Ron was the guy who wrote the theme song to Power Rangers and X-Men the Animated Series, but I couldn't find anything to actually verify what Google AI was telling me. So I decided to just ask Ron, and he let me know that he had nothing to do with the Wonderball jingle, really had no idea who wrote it, so I feel like that's pretty definitive. I then reached out to Nestle's media team because this is a super important media relations question, but they didn't get back to me, so if they end up responding, I will post their answer in the comments below, but I wouldn't hold my breath. I even stooped so low to Shazam the commercial, and that came up with nothing, as you would probably expect. I spent some time digging through LinkedIn trying to figure out who was in a leadership position in the marketing team at Nestle during the period this commercial would have happened. Couldn't really find anything, so I decided to give up on this one. Who knows who did this? If anyone from Nestle is watching this video and wants to give me more information, anything to go on, I would really appreciate that. Until then, let's move on to the next one, where I have quite a bit more information.
I'm working for an hourly wage. I went to high school, didn't do great. Still, I gotta make more cash.
I think this song was a little bit less popular than some of the big boys like $5 Footlong or JG Wentworth or whatever, but even though I really still don't know too much about what Education Connection did, I can still sing every word to this song, so I think that makes it a pretty good jingle. There are a few different versions of this jingle, so I decided to focus on the main one, the first one that came out. The first thing I found said that this song was at least co-written by a guy named Jason, who went by the name Rusty J. He was originally from New York and then moved to Nashville and kind of bounced around a few other places before landing in LA. So around 2008, he's living in Los Angeles, and he's kind of making a name for himself on MySpace. He's getting quite a lot of regular listeners through his MySpace player. In 2009, he and Anthony Falcone, who was a producer, wrote the jingle for Education Connection, but I really didn't know how that came to be. I didn't know if they were approached or if they applied for it or how they really even knew each other, but I knew that those two were somehow involved in the creation of this jingle. Anthony studied music production in college and then moved out to LA, where he got a spot working with Dave Aaron, who was Tupac's producer, and just learning from him. Through that relationship and through his production skills, he actually landed a role with Jennifer Lopez, where he got a platinum record as a producer. And then for a while, he continued to be a pretty top producer, working with people like Mark Anthony and Willow Smith and even Snoop Dogg. I wasn't really sure how he got involved with Education Connection, how he knew Rusty J. None of that was really connecting. Anthony's website said, quote, "Along the way, Falcone penned and produced the wildly popular Telly Award-winning Education Connection commercials, which aired continuously for 5 years and racked up over 2 million plays on YouTube." End quote. Anthony was actually the one, I think, kind of responsible for getting the commercial the kind of viral popularity it got, because he's the one who posted it to YouTube in 2009, and it took off from there. I also saw something else online that a guy named James Vassallo helped co-write it, but I could find literally nothing about him or that. And the article that claimed that was gone from the internet, so I have no idea what their reasoning was behind that. Since then, obviously, Anthony has continued to be a big producer, but I couldn't find much about Rusty J or where his career went. I saw an article that he was still making music back in 2012, but that's over a decade ago at this point. There is a music photographer who has the same name as Rusty J's real name, and they kind of look similar, but I'm not confident enough to say it's the same guy. I don't know. The actress in the commercial, Andriana Veith, was actually in a few kind of bit roles, like the Austin Powers movies and that 70s show, but it looks like, at least according to IMDb, the Education Connection commercial was kind of one of the last things that she did. In 2023, during the writer's strike, she ran a GoFundMe saying, quote, "My son and I have been seriously struggling during this writer's strike, and in order to avoid homelessness, I am asking everyone who has seen the Education commercial to help me finally get residuals from it." End quote. I also saw that she was streaming on Twitch for a bit, but I have no idea if that's a regular thing she still does. She was streaming with her son. Also, I knew she was the actress in the commercial, but I wasn't sure if she was the actual vocalist. Sometimes they'll hire actresses and then have a professional musician sing over it, just have the actress lip sync. I wasn't sure if that's what happened here. I saw somewhere that said the song was recorded by a group called the Morels with someone named Nicole as the singer, but in order to look at the article that claimed that, it was asking me to download something onto my computer, and I didn't feel comfortable doing that, so I had no idea what their reasoning was for that. So basically, I found a bunch of different information, but I had really no idea how to verify most of it or how to connect a lot of these different people who were working on this. So I decided to just ask Anthony Falcone, one of the people I was very confident actually had a role in the creation of this song. He agreed to give me a call and tell me the story of how this jingle came to be. Anthony said that the whole thing started when one of his best friends and his roommate out in LA got a job at a direct response marketing agency that Education Connection hired to create this campaign for him. This was around the time that the freecreditreport.com jingle was getting really popular, so this friend knew that, hey, Anthony makes music, maybe we can create a jingle for this and kind of build off of that commercial popularity that other jingles are getting. The company liked that idea, so they hired Anthony to see if he could make a jingle. Anthony said it was basically his first real job, so he was pretty excited to give it a shot. Education Connection and the marketing agency gave Anthony a list of takeaways, which is essentially what Education Connection wants people to take away after watching the commercial. They want people to say, I saw this commercial, these are the things that I now know about Education Connection. So Anthony said he and his other friend and other roommate, Rusty J, worked those takeaways into the lyrics, and that became the lyrics for the jingle. Anthony and Rusty had actually worked together quite a bit. Anthony even produced one of Rusty's albums. Anthony actually went to MTSU, the same place I went to school, and I'm assuming they met when they were both there and then moved out to LA kind of together. Anthony also said that if TikTok and YouTube existed back then, at least the way it does now, he and Rusty could have gotten so much bigger because they were making really good and interesting and cool stuff. They just had nowhere to put it. Rusty was getting pretty popular on MySpace, but MySpace music did not have the same viral possibility that places like TikTok have now. Anyway, the company hired Andriana to be the actress. Anthony and Rusty didn't know her. She was just the actress that the agency hired for the commercial, and she actually was the singer in it as well. She came over to Anthony's apartment and recorded herself singing the song in his home-built studio, which was like in a closet in his apartment. He said he used to like flip the mattress up whenever he needed to work in the studio and then would flip the mattress back down to sleep at night. He also stressed how hot and uncomfortable that studio was because it was LA in the summer with very bad AC. He said it was just a sweat box whenever you were recording in that closet. He also said that he had no idea where this concept of the Morels and Nicole came from. They had nothing to do with the jingle. After all was said and done, Anthony asked if he could put the commercial up on his YouTube channel, and Education Connection said sure, because they really had no reason to expect YouTube would become what it is now. And then the commercial got some traction on Vine first before it became just this big internet hit. So that's the story of the Education Connection jingle, straight from Anthony, the guy who made it. We also talked a little bit about the lasting impact of jingles, and it was really fascinating, especially within the context of this video. There are so many songs that have won Grammys, that get millions of streams on Spotify that I don't remember at all. But if I ask most people, do you remember the Education Connection commercials, they can immediately start singing the jingle. And that's gotta count for something, right? There's this weird stigma around thinking people best know your work because of this 90-second song that a company used in a jingle. But at the end of the day, a lot of people know your work, and that's more than most people can say.
I have a structured settlement and I need cash now. Call JG Wentworth, 877 cash now.
I'll admit, I never loved this commercial. I thought it was always more annoying and grating than fun and catchy, but at the end of the day, I'll never forget that phone number, so I guess it did its job, even if I really don't have any idea what JG Wentworth does. The commercial features opera singers in Viking costumes singing a kind of opera song that is very reminiscent of Gilbert and Sullivan. Ken Murray was the CMO of JG Wentworth, and he worked with a marketing company out of New York to come up with the idea for the commercial. The agency pitched a few different ideas for directions they could go, but it was this kind of ridiculous idea about Viking opera singers that really stuck out to Ken. He said, quote, "We have to do this. I'm either going to lose my job or it's going to be super successful," end quote. He said when the marketing agency asked him what his goals were for the ads, one of the primary goals he gave them was that he wanted people to be singing in the shower about JG Wentworth. And the marketing agency was like, say no more, we'll do that. They hired actual opera singers for the commercial, but I couldn't figure out who those singers actually were. So this one was a little bit less interesting to me. I didn't really care that much about the commercial, and it seems like it was all a product of a marketing agency, so I just kind of left it there. But let me know if you have any more information about this commercial in the comments below. And now we're getting into a couple that are a little bit easier to track. I'm sure we all remember this commercial, and I'm sure we're all still really sad that we can't get a footlong sandwich for $5 anymore. I mean, what is this world coming to? I'm also not the first person to ask the question who is responsible for this whole thing that happened, so this one was a little bit easier to find information about. As you'd probably expect, this song came from an ad agency that Subway hired called MMB. They decided that selling a footlong sandwich for $5 was kind of all you needed to tell people, so they just pumped the commercial full of that phrasing and thought, how many times can we say $5 footlong in a commercial before it gets annoying? The people behind the commercial at MMB, Jerry Cronin and Jamie Mambro, said, quote, "It was just, let's see how many times we can say $5 footlong. Let's mention it as many times as possible without making someone hurt us. We wanted to make sure no one would miss the message," end quote. To actually create the song, they hired a guy named Jimmy Harned, who worked at a company called Tone Farmer. I can't find too much information about Tone Farmer. It actually might not exist anymore because the website gives me an error message, but I'm assuming it's a company that provided songs and jingles for commercial and TV purposes, similar to what they did here. I also couldn't figure out who was the actual vocalist for the $5 footlong song. It might have been Jimmy, but I reached out to Jimmy and I asked him if he had any more information he could share. He hasn't gotten back to me. So if he does reply, then I will put what he said in a comment below the video. And now we get to probably the most well-documented commercial of the lot.
Well, I was shopping for a new car, which one's me? A cool convertible or an SUV? Too bad I didn't know my credit was whack, cause now I'm driving off the lot in a used subcompact.
This commercial actually had a band performing in it, which immediately makes it more interesting than the other ones we talked about, and it makes it feel more authentic and less like it's just the product of an ad agency, even though I'm sure it is the product of an ad agency. There were actually two different versions of this concept. After the huge success of the first one, they got rid of the original band and decided to host this contest to become the next freecreditreport.com band. After this big nationwide competition, they ended up with a band called the American Secrets. It used to be like the Victoria's Secrets, but they changed their name to understandably not be sued by Victoria's Secret. But that's not the version of these ads that I want to focus on. It's not the ones that most people care about. I want to look back at the original, the whole pirate band thing that was going on. The leader of the band in those commercials was a guy by the name of Eric Violette, who was born in 1981 in Montreal and has a super thick French-Canadian accent, which made it hard for anyone to understand what he was saying when he tried singing the song, which isn't ideal for a commercial trying to get a point across. But the agency behind the ad hired him because he was an actor who studied at the National Theatre School of Canada, and the casting director knew that he had his own band, something that they could feature in the ad. But looking at the casting director's comments now, it seems like the other people in the band weren't his actual band, they were just other actors who they hired to fill it out. The bassist was a guy named Vincent Charon, I'm sorry, I'm not good at names, we all know this. And the drummer was a guy named Mario Tallaro. Dave Molenfeld, who was the director, who we'll talk more about later, said, quote, "The trio of actors had amazing chemistry. At one point, we almost made a reality show with them." Despite the kind of jaunty pop stuff that Eric was lip-syncing to in the commercial, his actual taste in music was far more rock and heavy. The band he formed after those commercials, a band called God Against God, was really industrial metal type songs. He said that being in those commercials gave him an opportunity to focus on his music that he might not have had without them. He said, quote, "It allowed me to learn a lot. I would never have been able to do that on my own. The commercials were a way to push the band." It seems like God Against God isn't really active anymore, but he's still making music under the name of RYV. That's way more toned down, kind of folky, singer-songwriter-y type stuff. Some of his most recent work is pretty atmospheric and ethereal, kind of haunting, honestly, but he's a good artist. The concept for these commercials came from Dave Molenfeld, who we quoted earlier, and he worked at an ad agency called the Martin Agency. He said when they were conceptualizing this, quote, "We thought of who is always broke. Hipster musicians were at the top of the list," end quote. Dave grew up playing music, specifically keyboard, but he set it to the side in college. Whenever the Martin Agency needed someone to write the jingle for this commercial, he busted it back out and wrote the Free Credit Report jingle. And then once Eric's voice proved to be a little bit too accented for the purposes of the commercial, Dave actually sang the song. So the voice you hear in the commercial is Dave, and Eric is just lip syncing to it. After creating this song, it kind of ignited the love of jingles, and Dave resurrected his love of music, and he became the de facto jingle guy at the Martin Agency. He even started his own company called English Major LLC to focus on creating music and songs for commercials. He also started a band called This Is Society Dance Music, which he said the goal was, quote, to move from 30-second pop songs to 3-minute 30-second pop songs. It looks like Dave left the Martin Agency in 2019 and now does English Major full-time, and he had a pretty successful campaign for Oreo, which is cool. It's unclear why Free Credit Report decided to move on from the original guys and hire a new band. It's speculated that maybe they just wanted an actual band in the commercial. Chris Maloney, who was the head of marketing at the parent company, said, quote, "We wanted a real band who were very talented musicians, but who could take a tongue-in-cheek approach to the commercials in a way that could tell a story and be embraced by a wide population. Plus, running a contest where you're looking for a new band is going to bring a ton of free publicity, so that was definitely an added bonus." Anyway, those are some of my favorite, or at least most memorable, commercial jingles from my childhood, and as much information as I could find about them. If you know anything else that you can verify, please let me know using the comments below, or send me an email if you are from one of these companies and had a role in any of these jingles. I would love to hear more about your story. Again, give the video a like if you ended up liking it, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more of these random research projects.